Hey everybody, this is Erica, the technology nerd who likes to film stuff, and I've got the OnePlus One device here. I've had a couple of days to play with it now, and I want to make a semi-review first impressions video. My first impressions videos kind of come out to be the length of a review anyway, so this is the preview, partial mini review, first impressions review thing. I really don't know what I'm going to call it, but I will tell you everything that I think about it so far. So let's go ahead and check it out. When checking out the size and the build quality of the OnePlus One device, we can see that it's actually quite large. Now keep in mind that I've got very tiny hands, so anything I touch looks large. But when taking the OnePlus One device and holding it next to something like the Galaxy Note 3, at first glance you would think that they're the same size pretty much. On the Note 3 we have a 5.7-inch display versus the 5.5-inch display that's on the OnePlus One device. And it does make a little bit of a difference. But what I think makes the OnePlus One device quite a large device is the fact that it's got these extra bezels here on the top and the bottom that you can see there. So when holding it next to the Galaxy Note 3, we can see that it is a little bit taller than the Galaxy Note 3, but the Note 3 is still a bit wider. So for me, they're relatively the same size phone. A device that I usually like to compare the OnePlus One to is the LG G3. The LG G3 has the same size display, 5.5 inches, as you can see here. But LG did a good job fitting a 5.5-inch display in a relatively small frame. You can see that it is quite a bit taller, and it's just a hair wider as well. You can take a look at the respective thicknesses as well. And even though this device is quite large, one thing I have to commend OnePlus on is that it's very well built. There is no creaking, there is no rattling. It feels incredibly solid, and the build quality is really nice. I love the look of this device. I love how the screen protrudes upward a little bit. And we've got this lip here where the display ends. It just gives it a nice finish. Keep in mind that this is not metal, this is actually a plastic with a chrome finish to it. It goes all the way around the device. But it's a pretty sexy looking device, I have to say it myself. So for moving on from the build quality, I want to take a little bit of a look around the device. Starting with the back cover, we have the camera. This is a 13 megapixel sensor. We've also got a dual LED flash. It's not a dual tone LED flash, so it doesn't correct for white balance, but it is a dual LED flash. We've got the microphone here. Underneath the back cover is an NFC antenna. On the right-hand side, we have nothing but the power button. On the left-hand side, we have the SIM card tray. We've also got a volume rocker. I'm glad that the buttons feel nice and clicky. On the top, we've got a microphone. We've also got a standard headphone jack. On the bottom, we've got dual speakers, we've got a microphone, and also a micro USB port. Then looking at the front of the device, it's protected by Gorilla Glass 3, so it's well protected against scratches because of native damage resistance. Basically, the molecular formulation is a little bit better than it was before they go to temper the glass. So we've got a very nice resistant glass that doesn't get very deep scratches. What I've noticed with Gorilla Glass 3 is that while it doesn't get very deep scratches, it still gets very light ones, so I haven't really been using screen protectors. But one thing that really does still happen is if you drop the device flat on its face, the glass is still going to crack. Native damage resistance or not, it just cracks all the same. So we've got the front-facing camera here, we've got the notification LED, and we've also got the ambient light sensor and proximity sensor right next to that. On the bottom, we've got some capacitive touch buttons and also the receiver at the top. The version that I have here is the Sandstone Black. It also comes in white. This is the 64 gigabyte version. And when looking at storage, I'm happy to say that we have about 55 gigabytes of available storage if you were to get the 64 gigabyte version. That's incredible. I don't feel like I'm going to run out of app installing space anytime soon. This device also films in 4K, so you have internal storage on this device that can actually adequately handle the size of footage. All of that is important because this does not have an SD card slot. You can actually remove this back cover. Underneath the back cover is a battery that's built in. You can't use or replace that. You would have to take the phone apart and disconnect it from the motherboard. But indeed, you can take this back cover off with the idea of it being swappable. And I think that that's a great thing that this is swappable, because although I love the finish of this, the sandstone black feels very nice and matte. It's kind of a coarse feeling to it, but what I'm seeing is that it does tend to take smudges, like oil smudges from fingers. I can see that it does scratch as well, and you can see them pretty apparently. So it's nice that we can take that back cover off. I actually want to do that right now, just so that you can see what it looks like. So to remove that back cover, you just need to remove the SIM card. And then I've got to find a way in. I have to pry around the device and pull it off. Let's see if I can do this. So the easy thing to do is take your fingernail and push it in this weak spot here, which is where the SIM ejection tool is. And then you can take something like your SIM ejection tool or even your micro SIM card and just wedge it in there and start going around until you can get those clips to release themselves. This really not an easy process. While they call this removable, quote unquote, this is not something that I would do on a daily basis by fear of damaging the back cover or making the clips not stay in place as well. I'm not sure. This is the very first time I've taken this off, so give me a second while I unhook some of the other clips. Finally, after quite a bit of prying, it's starting to come off. I would definitely not ever do this again until I had a cover I could swap it with. There's just no reason to put your phone through this amount of stress, and my fingers as well. There we go. That's quite a doozy to remove, my goodness. But at least I can prove to you, no, that battery is not removable, and no, we do not have any type of card slot for expansion. Underneath the back cover, it looks like we have the NFC antenna. And when you trade out the back covers, the volume rocker and also the power buttons stay in place. What you're left with are these buttons that are just short of touching the board. So this is nice to see some of the insides, but I really won't be doing this again. Now that I have the back cover back on, I was a little panicky thinking that the clips wouldn't go back in place so well, but they did. The device is not creaking or rattling, just as it was before. Although I'm not so convinced that it looks as seamless as before, because I kind of had to wedge that plastic a little bit. So it's not something I would recommend doing, just letting you know, unless you have a brand new back cover in tow. Got a gap here that wasn't there before. So now that I've had a chance to reveal the look of the battery underneath the back cover, I want to talk about battery life, which I have been incredibly happy and fascinated with. This device is a 3,100 milliamp hour battery. It is only bested by the Xperia Z2, which has a 3,200 milliamp hour battery. So the battery inside here is very nice for its size, and I'm quite pleased. Take a look at how good this battery is. I was able to get through a 16-hour day, almost 17 hours, and I was able to get almost 7 hours of on-screen time. This is keeping it with auto brightness, on LTE, on Wi-Fi, doing all kinds of things throughout the day. And the thing just wouldn't die. This is like LG G2 status. This is actually like better than LG G2 status in terms of the battery. I am so happy that this is a device that I have. I feel like I can use it, and it's just not going to die. Although I did notice that the one thing that will be a vice to it is gameplay. I can see that the battery does go down like the other devices pretty quickly. But with just general usage, I was completely amazed. I was able to go one day, 11 hours, 33 minutes on battery, no issues whatsoever. Still was getting over 5 hours of on-screen time, doing everything possible throughout the day, using it as my mobile office, taking pictures, doing a lot of things on social media, watching Netflix, all of that. Here we have a day that's 17 hours, 23 minutes. And we've got still 6.5 hours of on-screen time. And during this day, I was taking plenty of 4K video, taking pictures, using it very strenuously. So my impressions of the battery is excellent. I don't know if other people are getting the same results, but this has just been incredible for me. And just so you know, I have not been cheating with the performance mode. Everything I have right now is just as default. I have balanced for profile. It's not underneath power save and it's not underneath performance mode. Everything is default as it's supposed to be. So this device has won a spot in my pocket for a while to come simply because I can rely on it for battery. It's very, very important and makes or breaks a device. So now you know. Now, to release any feelings of tension from fanboyisms, because I am fanning out about the battery life, I also have to balance it with some of the negative things, like the menu interface just completely drives me bananas. Cyanogen, you need to take some pointers or tips about organization because I can never find any settings on here. For some simple button and gesture features, they put them in 3 different places instead of one category. We've got things underneath the lock screen, underneath interface, underneath display, underneath buttons. It's just too much, too drawn out. So that is really not good, especially because I was using this a lot this past week, and it was very hot out, and I would put it in my pocket, and I was using the gesture settings, such as to draw the circle on the display to activate the camera, which is quite cool. That's something that's brought over from Oppo. Also to use the V that turns on the flashlight, which is also something that's been brought over from Oppo. I think I disabled it. And the sensitivity on the display is not quite tweaked as it should be, so I noticed that it's easy to turn on the flashlight when it's just sitting in my pocket, or it's easy to activate the camera when it's just sitting in my pocket. And because the menu system is a little bit weird, I found it very difficult to find out how to turn those off at a moment's notice. I just had no idea how to disable that feature. So I ended up just having to deal with it until I had time to play around with it more. And you can imagine that gets pretty annoying because this problem kept happening. It kept turning itself on. It kept doing random weird things.
Oh no!
You tell me, oh yeah, it's very small distance.
I know, I said this.
So please, Cyanogen and OnePlus, adjust the sensitivity of the display. Fix your menus, make things easier to find. I imagine that somebody who really appreciated the price of this phone would buy it, and if they didn't know much about Android or know about settings or how to use them, there are a couple features on here that they just might never discover. Or in my case, they might enable something on accident and never be able to figure out how to turn it off. So this device does do some cool things if you can ever figure out how to turn them on. One of them that's quite nice is that instead of having to do the 2-finger pull or the 1-finger pull, you can just simply activate the right side or the left side of the display to bring down your quick toggle settings. Then if you go from anywhere else, it will bring down your notification panel. So if I go from here, notification panel, notification panel, notification panel. But this one little part here on the right side of the display that I set, it's going to bring down my quick toggles. So that's definitely a nice, quick, intuitive feature. It took me a little bit of time to get used to, but now I do like it. One of the big things with this device is that you are able to enable on-screen navigation bar. So if I hit this, you see here we have the on-screen navigation bar. So you no longer have to use the capacitive buttons along the bottom. I find this to be very nice if you want to use this extra bezel at the bottom so that you can hold the device. So if you're reading, it really is quite helpful for handling this device because it is quite big. So you can enable those, or you can simply just use your capacitive buttons. You can control how long you want these capacitive buttons to stay on, for a few seconds, for many seconds. And you can also program what these capacitive buttons at the bottom are able to do. I have it just set up as normal Android right now with the task switcher, the home button, and your back button. So if you are to use the on-screen navigation bar, what I notice is that underneath certain games, you're going to be stuck with the navigation bar here. But if you are annoyed by this navigation bar and you still don't want to use the capacitive buttons, you do have another option. There is a setting that is called Expanded Desktop. You can go ahead and hit it. I have it underneath this quick toggle setting. You can also get to it under button settings as well, I believe. If you hit on it, it is now expanded. So what we've done is essentially increase the amount of screen size that you're able to use by hiding the navigation bar. You can see I was able to swipe upward and then it hides itself. So that now when I go underneath Granny Smith, you can see that the game is in full screen mode. I think that that is absolutely brilliant. It's really nice that you can have the decision to go between on-screen buttons, and you can get rid of them if you'd like to with the expanded desktop. Now keep in mind that this does get a little bit annoying from time to time, but it's very easy to disable within your quick toggle settings. You can just go underneath normal instead of expanded, and there they are again. So that is just absolutely brilliant. That is wonderful. I use that all the time now. So also, like I mentioned, you've got some nice gestures. Underneath display and lights, we've got the double tap to wake. So you can double tap and you can see that it's not working. Then if you turn it on underneath display and lights, you've got that gesture enabled. Double tap, double tap. If you double tap again, it will not turn off the display, which I find to be a little bit confusing, but what you need to do is double tap at the top here. So if you've used double tap features on other devices, I find that to be a little bit confusing, but I do like that I have the ability to at least do that. And then underneath interface, we've got gesture shortcuts. There's 3 different ones. The camera, music, where you can use 2 fingers vertically to play pause, draw left arrow for previous track, draw right arrow for next track. And then you've also got the V for the flashlight. And all of these work very well, but as I mentioned, it's a little bit more sensitive than I would like it to be. And I can also draw a V to get the torch light to come on. You can see it's easy to turn off. So really a very nice set of features, so many different things to play with, very customizable. There's also themes. So underneath themes, they give you a couple of free ones. You can set everything in the theme pack from styles, icons, fonts, wallpapers, lock screen wallpapers, boot animations, sound packs. You can apply as much or as little as you'd like. There's also an application that's called Themes Showcase where you can buy more themes. Some of them are free, some of them are paid. And still you can go into the Google Play Store and type in CM11 theme and you can apply many, many more or purchase many more. So this device is insanely customizable, but it's a little bit daunting and complicated like I mentioned because things are just a bit hard to find, but still it does not knock down the integrity of everything that I can do with this device. The last thing that I thought was pretty cool is called Profiles. So if you turn on Profiles, you're able to have these preset profiles, or you can simply add and make your own. For example, let's make test. And underneath the settings for test, I can choose how I want this particular profile to behave. So if I want GPS to be disabled or enabled, I can decide that. If I want data sync to be off, I can decide that. If I want apps to behave a certain way, I can decide that. And you're able to make all these different profiles and easily toggle which profile that you would like. Underneath the quick toggle settings, so we have test, and you can change it to your automobile profile, you can change it to your default, your home, your night, your silent, your work, or the one that you made yourself. So it's very easy to get your phone working in a preset way that you need it at any designated time. So yep, pretty cool. So now getting into the display, it's 5.5 inches, 401 pixels per inch. A lot of you know that I am a stickler for properly calibrated displays. I like it when colors are accurate. I like when it's calibrated properly. And with this display, my fiance Francois has been working on the calibration. So I can speak for the color accuracy. It looks quite nice. I know a lot of people like oversaturated displays. They think that sRGB isn't a very wide color gamut because it's not. So content that's sRGB may not be punchy enough for some people. When you have the display that is accurately calibrated though, sRGB looks plenty saturated by itself. I really don't see a need to have massive oversaturation, but there is something that you can do. If the display doesn't look as saturated or contrasty or something and you want to change the look of the display, you can play around with the compensation sliders. So if you go underneath display, go underneath screen color, you can see that we've got standard mode, which would be the accurately calibrated mode. You've got vivid, which increases the saturation a bit. And then you've got custom, where you can really mess around with things such as hue, which would be the color tone. You can mess around with the saturation. You can mess around with contrast. You can also mess around with intensity. And you can save it however you would please. Make your own little profile with it. That just looks awful, but you get the point. One thing that I can say for my particular device is that whites are a little bit more on the warm side, but I'm noticing that it's also a bit greenish. The white balance is a bit greenish. So I've seen people talking about variations with displays. Some displays look more bluish, some displays look a little bit too warm, but at least with what I am hearing so far, they want to offer some adjustments to help fix your white balance if things don't look quite right. So we will see how the developments with that will go in the near future. So big, nice display with a lot of potential. I also don't think it looks too reflective in direct sunlight, so it works very well outdoors. So with the developments that I'm hearing going on and what I know about this already, I think it's pretty excellent. Now moving right along, I want to talk about the speakers on this device. The first thing that I want to mention is that these are not stereo speakers. Yes, we have dual speaker, but it's not stereo speakers like we have on the HTC One M8. As far as how they sound, I noticed that they get nice and loud, but right now my opinion is that they sound quite tinny. I'm really hoping that they can make some adjustments on this because it doesn't give a nice full sound to me. It does sound quite tinny, especially when listening to voices. I'm not enjoying all the frequencies that I should be hearing. So they're okay, they're quite loud, but they're really not the best right now. So the last thing that I want to talk a little bit about is the camera. I don't want to get into a huge analysis over picture quality and video quality. I kind of just want to show you the interface a bit and talk about some features. So we have the ability to take 4K video. You also can use HDR. There's an HDR setting that you can use in 4K video. One unfortunate thing that I noticed right away with this camera is that there is no autofocus in video right now. What it will do as soon as you hit the record button, it will pick a focus point, and then it will just stay at that focus point unless you start tapping to focus. Apparently there was some issues that this camera was having with hunting when the autofocus was enabled, so they disabled it. So instead of staying on a certain focus point, it would hunt back and forth every few seconds and just wasn't usable. So it's disabled for now, and I hope they re-enable that and fix it soon. But that was something that was a little bit of a disappointment to me. Otherwise, when looking at the camera interface, I find it to be both interesting and confusing. Starting with the right-hand side, if you hit the camera button, the video camera button, it will start recording. If you hit the camera shutter button, it will take a picture. This is your panorama button, so this will open the panorama feature for you. We've got some settings along the bottom. This one will allow us to switch to the front-facing camera. You can also choose if you want auto flash, flash on, or flash off. And we've also got some general settings for the camera, video camera, and the general settings which allow you to use the power button to snap a picture, or even the volume rocker to snap a picture, or using the volume rocker to zoom. The default resolution is 13 megapixels. It's a 4:3 aspect. You can see that these are the ones that have a 16:9 aspect. One thing that bums me out a little bit is that the 4:3 aspect isn't what we're seeing in the viewfinder. We have a 16:9 aspect, so it's going to crop what we're looking at just a little bit. So far, I'm not seeing a setting to be able to see it with a 4:3 aspect. Maybe I am missing something, but that's just not what I see at the moment. It looks like instead of being 4:3, we're seeing 16:9, and what we're looking at is cropped. You also have the ability to control your picture quality. We've got burst mode, slow shutter speed. There's a couple of other things that you can adjust here. Underneath video, we have a couple of settings. You can choose 4K Ultra HD. We've also got 4K with a slower frame rate. We've got 1080p HD, 720p HD, standard definition, and everything else in between. We've got slow motion, 60 frames per second, 120 frames per second. You can choose your video codec, and you can play around with your audio codec as well. The last thing we have here is this circle. And you've got a couple of other settings. This is your exposure compensation. So you can choose what's going on with the exposure. You can play around with the white balance. Here we have a timer. You can also turn on geotagging, and this I don't really like. This is your effects setting. When you click on this, you are presented with a very long list of effects. Now, touching on each effect is adding them to quick settings inside of the viewfinder. So you can see that if you flick, you can go through that very long list of bubbles that you have selected. And I find it to be a bit cumbersome to pan through all of these different settings to finally get to the one that I want, such as HDR. If you find this to be frustrating, you can select as many or as little as you want. So I would just get rid of everything for right now and keep just a few like HDR and auto. So I'm hoping that they create a little bit better of an interface for that, or at least have a couple of different categories instead of everything being in one spot. So the interface is just okay. I do like that you have the 4K resolution, but I really do hope that they add back the autofocus and have it working properly. So let's go ahead and look at some samples. So thank you everybody for watching. This has been Erica, the technology nerd who likes to film stuff. Please rate, comment, and subscribe. Please follow the link in the description to my Google Plus page. When I am not filming reviews, any updates or experiences that I have with the device that I am reviewing at the moment, I will post there, and people ask me questions on there, and I like to incorporate some of those questions in my reviews. So that's usually a good place to start if you're curious about something. So again, that link will be in the description. I'm going to continue using this device. I'm really hoping to see some updates as time goes by. I'm hoping to see some fixes because while this is a really great device, it's definitely not a perfect device. But I do think for the price, it's definitely worth it. And I hope that a lot of you get yours soon. I can tell you just for the battery life alone that the wait for the device is worth it. So hang in there. Please ask your questions in my comment section below or on my Google Plus post. And have a good night.